Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the material you share with us, articles, notes, maybe research, and, well, we dig into it together.
Yeah, we unpack it to pull out the key takeaways, maybe some surprising details, and try to get a real handle on what's inside.
And today, we are doing a deep dive into a subject that's, frankly, difficult, but really, really important: human trafficking.
hmm And we're narrowing our focus, specifically looking at one incredibly powerful personal story. We're drawing insights from excerpts you sent over from The Girl from Nigeria, a true story.
Exactly. So our goal here, our mission, if you like, is to really grasp the awful reality of this global problem, but through the lens of one person's journey.
We'll be extracting the key mechanisms, how the traffickers operate,
Right, understanding the just brutal challenges she faced, seeing how maybe some hope emerged.
and following her fight for justice, basically as it's laid out in the text you provided.
So this is the story of Joy, a young woman from Nigeria. And like you said, it's tough stuff.
It really is. But it's so vital for understanding the layers of trafficking and also, importantly, the possibility of survival, of reclaiming a life.
Okay, let's dive in. The story, it starts in Benin City, Nigeria,
Yeah. The source paints this picture of a place known for its culture, its history.
but also, tragically, it's identified as a major hotspot for human trafficking in Africa. That context is set right away.
Right. And the book also quickly zeroes in on Joy's specific situation. She was just 19.
Only 19, wow.
Yeah. And her family was facing severe poverty. Her father had passed away. Her mother was sick.
So she felt this huge weight on her shoulders, like she had to be the provider.
Exactly, this intense pressure, this sense of responsibility. And the source makes it clear that this created a vulnerability.
A vulnerability that traffickers are just waiting to exploit, which leads us to Madame Rose.
Yes, this is the beginning of the deception.
Yeah.
Madame Rose comes across not as some obvious villain, but as someone offering, an amazing chance. A job as a hairdresser in Italy. And the promises were tailored perfectly to Joy's desperate situation. Good money to send home, safety, and all the travel sorted out for her.
It sounds all too good to be true, you know?
Well, it was.
Hmm.
The source quickly pulls back the curtain. Madame Rose was a trafficker, part of a whole criminal network preying on vulnerable women.
It mentions these madams are kind of infamous for this, right? Luring girls with fake promises.
Unfortunately, yes, especially on roads from West Africa into Europe. And the source hints at how organized it is, not just one person acting alone.
So forged documents, maybe bribes?
Forged documents, bribes, manipulation, it all started before she even left Nigeria.
Okay, so then comes the journey itself. The source calls it the brutal pipeline to Europe. That sounds ominous.
It was horrific. The book details this multi-stage nightmare route, first across the Sahara Desert,
Okay.
then into Libya, and finally that incredibly dangerous crossing over the Mediterranean Sea to Italy. Each part was just filled with its own kind of terror.
Just the desert crossing. The source describes being crammed in a truck. Yeah. With like 30 other people.
Yes, for days, in unbearable heat, people dying from dehydration right there in the truck. Just unimaginable.
And Libya. Was that any better?
Worse in many ways, according to the text.
Yeah.
Held in these camps, basically prisons run by smugglers. Not just held, but the source details horrific abuse, rape, violence, and being treated literally like cargo, bought and sold by different smuggling groups.
It's hard to even comprehend.
Yeah.
And then after all that, they still had to cross the sea.
In a flimsy dinghy, packed with 150 people, the engine failed.
Oh, no.
They just drifted. For 48 hours, ran out of water completely. The source makes it clear they were incredibly close to dying right there.
But they were rescued.
Thankfully, yes. The book mentions a German NGO ship, Sea-Watch 3, picked them up. They survived the journey.
But the ordeal wasn't over, was it? Arriving in Italy wasn't freedom.
Not at all. That's a key point the source makes. She wasn't met by relief workers. Madame Rose's people were there, waiting for her.
So straight back into the network's control.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of debt bondage comes in. A really core evil tactic.
They told her she owed them money for the trip.
A huge amount. The source states 35,000 euro.
35,000 euros. For that journey? How?
Well, the source implies it's a totally fabricated number.
Mhm.
It's deliberately set impossibly high.
So she could never possibly repay it.
Precisely. It covers supposed costs, travel, documents, maybe fees, but it's just a tool, a debt trap to keep her enslaved.
And the way she was supposed to repay it. The source says it was through forced prostitution.
Yes, on the streets. Turin, Milan, Naples, different Italian cities.
And how do they maintain control? Beyond just the death.
Multiple layers, according to the book. Physical violence was constant, beatings for any disobedience or attempt to leave.
Okay.
Then, terrifying threats against her family back home in Nigeria. If she talked, if she ran, they'd hurt her family.
And there was something else too. Psychological control. Something called juju.
Yes, juju rituals. The source explains these are traditional oaths taken in shrines back in Nigeria, often before the journey even begins.
How does that work as control for the traffickers?
Well, they manipulate the victim's own cultural and spiritual beliefs. They force them into these oaths, swearing secrecy, obedience.
And the victim believes something terrible will happen if they break the oath, like a curse.
Exactly. It creates this deep internalized fear of spiritual consequences if they escape or report the traffickers. It's incredibly powerful, working alongside the physical threats and the debt.
So she was trapped physically, financially, and psychologically.
Absolutely. And the source says she lived like this, in silence, for almost 2 years.
2 years. That silence, that isolation. That's what these criminals rely on, isn't it?
It is. Breaking it takes unimaginable courage. It's incredibly difficult and dangerous.
But the source does describe a turning point, a moment where things started to change for Joy.
Yes. One night, on the streets, she met someone, Chiara, a volunteer.
From an anti-trafficking organization.
Correct. An Italian NGO called Liberazione e Speranza. Liberation and hope.
And what happened? Did Chiara confront the traffickers?
No, nothing dramatic like that. It was much quieter but profound. She just gave Joy a card and whispered something like, "We can help when you're ready."
Wow, just that little gesture.
A tiny spark. But the source says Joy held onto that card for months. Months of internal struggle, battling the fear, the juju oath, the threats.
But eventually,
Eventually, she made the choice. One cold night in Milan, the source says, she just ran, and she called Chiara.
that must have taken incredible bravery.
Immense. And that call set things in motion. The NGO was ready.
So they helped her, got her somewhere safe.
Immediately. The source details how she was taken to a safe house. She started getting counseling for the trauma, legal help, and crucially, protection.
Protection from the traffickers finding her again.
Exactly. And that's where the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding her life began.
Did they ever catch the traffickers? Madam Rose?
Yes, they did. According to the source, the Italian police eventually arrested her specific traffickers.
Good.
And interestingly, Madame Rose herself was caught later as part of a much bigger Europol operation.
Europol, so like a Europe-wide thing.
Yeah, the EU's law enforcement agency. They were targeting Nigerian trafficking rings operating across multiple European countries. It shows you the scale of these networks.
It's not just isolated groups, it's organized crime.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Transnational. And Joy's role in this was critical.
Testified against them.
She did. She became a witness. The source emphasizes how crucial her testimony was. It helped convict 4 members of the network she'd been trapped in.
Could relive all that trauma in court. That's
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Truly remarkable courage. And the source also notes that she was eventually granted asylum in Italy in 2020.
So she could stay legally, rebuild her life there without that constant fear.
Yes, exactly. A crucial step towards stability.
And what you doing now, does the source say?
Incredibly, she now works with a shelter herself, helping other survivors.
Wow. Turning her own horrific experience into a way to help others escape the same fate.
It's a powerful testament to her resilience, and it really brings home how her individual story, while unique, reflects a much, much larger problem.
Yeah, the source connects it back to the bigger picture. It says her experience isn't isolated at all.
Not even close. It gives some stark figures from the IOM, the International Organization for Migration.
Like what?
Thousands of Nigerian women trafficked to Europe every year. And one specific year, 2016, it estimates that something like 80%, 80 of Nigerian women arriving in Italy by sea were likely victims of trafficking.
80%. That's
Isn't it?
staggering. It just shows how systematic this exploitation is on that route.
It really does. And the source helps us understand why it thrives. It points to this toxic mix of factors.
Like,
Silence, obviously, operating in the shadows, but also poverty, desperation back home, corruption that maybe allows borders to be crossed.
yeah.
These things create the perfect storm for traffickers.
But Joy's story, despite all the horror, it does offer some hope, doesn't it? The source emphasizes that.
Absolutely. Survival is possible. Escape is possible. And maybe most importantly, bringing this out into the open, raising awareness, they can actually save lives.
Breaking the silence the traffickers count on.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the source material leaves us with a pretty clear message and its final words.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that human trafficking isn't some abstract issue. It's real, it's happening now, it's global, and it affects millions.
And it directly links telling these stories, like Joy's, to fighting back. It says
Yep.
something like, every time we tell a story, we break the silence.
And every time we listen, we become part of the fight. It really highlights the power in just bearing witness and learning and sharing these realities.
Okay, so let's leave you with this final thought, drawing from what we've just discussed from the source. Think about the power packed into that single quiet moment when Kiara offered Joy that card. Just a small piece of paper, a few whispered words.
Or the sheer, almost unbelievable courage it took for Joy, after months and months trapped by fear, by threats, by those juju oaths, to finally make that call, to risk literally everything.
So how do you think these seemingly small acts, an offer of help, a moment of awareness, knowing help exists, how do they start to chip away at this huge problem that just thrives in silence and isolation?
And what does standing witness really mean? Not just in a courtroom like Joy eventually did, but for all of us. What does it mean simply by learning, by understanding, and maybe by sharing a story like the one we've explored today? Something to think about.